Hi guys, and welcome to the Stephen King Sematary Club. Hi guys, we are now on The Stand, which is one of Stephen King's largest books, and it's the biggest one we have covered to date. So this is the version that I'm using, and it is uncut. There's Mr. King. This book is dedicated to his wife. It says, "For Tabby, this dark chest of wonders." And we begin with "The Circle Opens," which is kind of like a little prologue, and it jumps right into the action. There's a man named Charlie who wakes up his wife and their baby daughter, who I think is about 3 years old. Charlie is the husband, Sally's the wife, and baby Laban is the little kid. They're in California. We don't really know much information other than he wakes them up very early in the morning and says, "We have to leave, we have to get out now." And he basically says that he escaped from work early and he shouldn't have been allowed to do that. And they take off. They pack just a few things and they take off. Quote, "By dawn, they were running east across Nevada and Charlie was coughing steadily." Then we jump into Captain Trips from the 16th of June through the 4th of July, 1990. So that's the date range for this first book. So book 1, chapter 1. We are in Arnett, Texas. And we get the classic Stephen King type scenario where it's a whole bunch of not necessarily older men, but just kind of men hanging around together, talking in a gas station. Usually the setting is a grocery store or some sort of convenience store or a bar. Today it's a gas station. Now that I have watched The Walking Dead, I cannot picture Stu Redman as anyone else but Andrew Lincoln. He just seems like Rick Grimes to me. The whole thing. Like, it just, his character is very Rick Grimesy. So when I read this now, I definitely picture Andrew Lincoln, which is kind of weird, but I also can't stop. And I don't remember who I used to picture. I don't remember what I used to think of Stu when I was younger. So anyway, we hear from Stu, and he is kind of like a quintessential Stephen King character. He has good merit, he had a bad history, a lot of hard knocks in his life. There's a whole litany of things. Let's see. His father died when he was 9, and he started working right away at the age of 9. And he helped support his mother and his 2 brothers. One of his brothers died. His mother died right before he graduated from high school. He was going to escape and go to college, but once his mother died, he had to work. He had to go back to work, and college just kind of was an unreachable dream for him. His wife died after 18 months of marriage. So he just, one thing after another. Quote, "That had been 4 years ago since he had thought of leaving Arnett, searching for something better, but small town inertia held him." That's on page 5. And I think that's pretty apt. That is a thing where you dream of escaping a small town, but you're still there years later. Stu is sitting there looking out the window of this gas station, and he sees a Chevy coming down the road, and it's veering, it's not staying on the road, it's kind of going off in the back, and it's not speeding, and it's going slow, and it's meandering, and all of a sudden he realizes that it is coming to the gas station, and it has no intention of stopping, and it's heading right for the pumps. He quickly flicks off the fuel to the pumps from inside, so that when the Chevy does in fact run into the pumps, they don't explode. The men go out to investigate, see what happened. They open the car door and Charlie falls out. So Charlie from the beginning of the story, who has fled from California, and his family. Quote, "A sick stench compounded of blood, fecal matter, vomit, and human decay. It was a ghastly, rich, sick, dead smell." Page 8. So Sally and Laban are dead, and Charlie does not look good. They drag him in to the station, and he is just gross. He has a runny nose, he's radiating heat from his body, he has a cough, he has a very swollen neck, and he's starting to get dark puppy circles under his eyes. So these are all things that would freak me out, being a germaphobe, but the men kind of mention that it could be food poisoning. The guy named Norm says maybe it's food poisoning because the plates are from California, so they've been driving cross country. Maybe they stopped at a place that served them bad food. And I'm thinking, what kind of food poisoning does that to someone? And Vic, another man from the gas station, he thinks that it looks similar to cholera. So they call the authorities take him away, and he dies on the way to the hospital. Chapter 2, Algonquin, Maine is the location, and we have Franny Goldsmith, who's 21, and Jess Ryder, who's 20. Franny and Jess have kind of been seeing each other, and she has found out she's pregnant. So she springs this on him in this chapter and just throws it at him that she's pregnant, and kind of gets mad at him for the way he reacts, and he wants to get married and she doesn't want to get married. She gave him a whole list of options of what could be done, and she listed all of them. So like marriage and keep the baby, marriage, don't keep the baby, don't get married, keep the baby, give the baby up for adoption, have an abortion, any combination of those things. She goes through them all. And she's had time to think about this, and he has not, so it's quite unfair. And we find out that the reason she's pregnant is because either the birth control that she was taking did not work, or she forgot to take the birth control and then forgot that she forgot. So she really doesn't know how she got pregnant. It seems to be some kind of a mistake. And I really do feel more sorry for Jess than I did when I first read this. Now I'm kind of like, well, neither one of you intended to get pregnant. And, he just had this sprung on him and doesn't know how to react. They're both college students. Not a good time to be pregnant, unexpectedly. By the end of this chapter, no decision has been made other than Fran does not want to marry Jess. That is the only thing that gets decided upon. Chapter 3. Norm Brewitt had been one of the men at the Texaco station, and we see him at his house, and he wakes up, he doesn't feel great. His wife has gone over to babysit for a neighbor's children and left Norm home with their 2 kids. Well, when she's over at their house, the kids that she is sitting for start coughing, and one almost chokes on a big wad of phlegm. She has to turn the kid upside down and smack it to get the phlegm out of its mouth. So not typical babysitting behavior. And she starts coughing. You could see the attack vectors at work. Charlie got the men at the Texaco sick. Norm got his wife sick. She brought the sickness to her babysitting charges. You can see the cycle starting to happen. Norm was thinking about the night before and about how the coroner had come and had refused to speculate, quote, "But it ain't cholera, and don't you go scaring people saying it is. There'll be an autopsy and you can read about it in the paper." Page 22. So, even though Norm is sick, he wakes up not feeling well. He does not connect it to Charlie Campion, the guy who fled California with his family, ended up at the Texaco, who was very, very sick. Norm does not even consider the fact yet that maybe he caught something from this guy. So back at the Texaco, Hap, who runs the place, is sneezing, and Vic, a guy who's with him at the Texaco, who was there the night before, is also feeling like he's sick. So we've got all these men who have started just randomly getting sick after coming into contact with someone who is very sick, and they don't seem to put it together. Anyway, Hap's cousin, Joe Bob, is a state patrol officer, and he comes to the Texaco to warn Hap and Vic that things were fishy with the sick family. The Plague Center in Atlanta and the State Health Department of Texas have been conferring, and they have decided that the men who are at the gas station need to be quarantined. So this is a very serious thing, and Vic says, quote, "Maybe it ain't a cold." Also, quote, "Maybe we're coming down with it, what that Campion had, what he died of." Page 26. So all of a sudden, ding, 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 it makes sense. Now we're starting to get scared, especially because everyone at the Texaco has started showing symptoms, and Norm's wife has started showing symptoms, and the kids she's babysitting for have also started showing symptoms. So this thing has started spreading quickly. Chapter 4 is a really good chapter. It gives us so much information that we didn't have before. This is a military compound, and Bill Starkey, some kind of military guy, he's watching monitors of the top secret building that Campion had escaped from. There are dead bodies everywhere. The clock turned red at June 13th, 1990, 2:37 and 16 seconds. He's just kind of, watching the chaos that has sprung from this. And whatever they were working on in this lab has been called Project Blue. We find out that 5 of the 6 men at Arnett have tested positive for an A' flu. Stuart Redman is negative, but so was Campion for over 50 hours, and he managed to escape from his watchman duties when the doors should have immediately closed on him. As soon as that clock went red, the doors were supposed to lock everyone in, so everyone would pretty much just die at the hands of this virus that got released. Then we find out that this flu has a 99.4% communicability, and it's a constantly shifting antigen virus. So a vaccine is almost impossible, because as soon as your body is able to start fighting it off, it changes on you, it mutates, and then you're right back to where you started. So you just pretty much die. And a very small percentage of people are immune to this. This is also one of the first instances that I can think of where there's mention of the shop, which is like a secret organization, and that will show up in later Stephen King works. That will show up in Firestarter. I'm not sure if we've heard about it yet, the shop. I can't remember off the top of my head. This might be the first appearance. And then at the very end of this, we find out that the head of Project Blue, who is actually Bill Starkey's son-in-law, has killed himself. He shot himself because of the mess that has ensued over this. Chapter 5, we meet Larry Underwood, and he is in New York. He cut a demo of Baby Can You Dig Your Man with Neil Diamond 18 months ago, and then ever since then, he's kind of been on this direction toward fame. So even though he cut this demo, Neil Diamond decided not to record the song, and he thought that was the end of that. But then someone decided that he should do the song himself, put it out there, and from there he just happened to get lucky with every turn. About 9 weeks ago, everything kind of just skyrocketed for him. His mother, Alice Underwood, is 51. She's kind of a hard woman. She doesn't easily share her emotions with Larry. She was a single mother. She raised him very strictly, had high expectations of him. He didn't exactly meet them, and he has come home because things devolved once he became famous. People started hanging on him. He started spending more money than he was able to pay, and he just kind of needed to get away from the California scene. So that's why he's back in New York. He kind of has crawled home with his tail between his legs a little bit. And, quote, "She hasn't been waiting for 3 years for me to show up after all. She only wanted me to stay lost." Page 47. He's talking about his mother. Larry's father died when he was 9. Quote, "Alice brought Larry the rest of the way up on her own, dominating his life with her proverbs and prejudices until he left home." Page 49. He and his mother have a very strained relationship. She offers for him to stay there, and he accepts, but he has a lot of pride, and he's feeling like he's failed a little bit, so he's trying to posture and pretend like things aren't as bad as she's probably assuming that they are. At the very end of this chapter, Alice is thinking, quote, "She also thought there was good in Larry, great good. It was there, but this late on it would take nothing short of a catastrophe to bring it out." Page 51. And as I'm rereading this, knowing what happens with Larry, I feel like his story arc might be one of the grandest. I feel like he goes from being kind of a not so great guy to being really admirable, and he grows a lot. He stretches, he grows, and it is indeed correct that it takes a catastrophe to bring out his potential. Chapter 6, Franny and her dad Peter are outside in the garden, and they are discussing the fact that she is pregnant. And her dad is just really awesome. He is very understanding. He doesn't blame her. He doesn't disown her. He doesn't dislike her. He's very respectful of her as an adult. He wants to know what her ideas are, what decisions she has come to. They talk a little bit about the fact that she had an older brother who died, and it's kind of turned her mom into a bitch. Her mom is horrible, and they kind of discuss that, you know, the brother dying really didn't go well for Carla, her mom. The brother Fred was Carla's favorite, and then Franny was Peter's favorite. So they each, quote, "We each had one of our own, but she lost hers," page 59. At the end of this chapter, Franny has decided that abortion is out. So now she's decided that no abortion and no marrying Jess. So her options are starting to narrow down. She's starting to choose. Chapter 7, we have the Texaco gas station men in quarantine now. Vic Palfrey wakes up and he's in a hospital room, and it has a steel door to it. He is confused, delirious, doesn't exactly know what's happening. He's kind of trying to piece it together in his mind as he starts coming out of his delirium a little bit. Quote, "He was sick, and this was not a cure or the beginning of one, only a brief respite," page 61. So he starts to realize that, you know, this is bad, this is not good, he's really sick, and he is only having moments of clarity. He's pretty much done for. In another section of this quarantine military hospital thing, Stu Redman is sitting around perfectly fine. He is not showing any symptoms, he's not sick, he is his normal self, and he starts getting angry because no one is giving him any answers. He's been poked and prodded, and they've done tests on him, and it's been a long time, and no one is giving him anything to go on. You know, he's just in the dark about everything. He's all by himself, you know, he's not sure what's happening. But he's tired of complying. They end up sending a doctor in to see him, a Dr. Denninger, and he's a young man, and Stu is quite gruff with him. He's very firm. He says, you know, you guys need to start telling me stuff that I want to know about, otherwise I'm not going to help you anymore. And you guys seem really afraid of this thing, and if you guys continue to, you know, poke and prod me, I might just, you know, kind of make it so that you guys are exposed to this. Because they come in dressed in their hazmat suits and stuff like that. So he's like, what if I were to make a little hole in your garments? So he tells Dr. Denninger, quote, "Get your ass out of here and send somebody in to talk to me, or send enough boys to take what you need by force," page 69. And then one of my other favorite chapters is chapter 8, and this kind of just shows how crazy this stuff is and how quickly it spreads and how far it spreads. So we have Joe Bob, who was the state police guy, who is Hap's cousin, and he stopped, on the same day that he talked to Hap and Vic, he stops a man for speeding. Harry Trent. Quote, "Joe Bob felt fine. Dying was the last thing on his mind. Nevertheless, he was already a sick man. He had gotten more than gas at Bill Hapscomb's Texaco, and he gave Harry Trent more than a speeding summons," page 70. So the guys from the Texaco got it. Then when Joe Bob went to warn them, he got it. And then he's out patrolling. He's out talking to people, giving tickets. He got this Harry Trent guy sick. Harry passed it on to 40 people, and they passed it on too. Quote, "Under the California desert and subsidized by the taxpayers' money, someone had finally invented a chain letter that really worked, a very lethal chain letter." It's on page 70. Harry goes into a diner. He infects a whole bunch of the employees at this diner. There's a couple from New York who ask him for directions. He gives them directions, and he also gives them the virus. They head out. They go to a motel. So they're in a motel, and they give the virus to people, and their kids give the virus to other kids while they're playing. And then all these people are from, you know, a whole bunch of different states. So then they all take it with them, and it's just insane. It's insane. And one of the kids from this New York couple in the motel, starts getting sick. And so they take it to a doctor's office. They find one in Kansas. They're in Kansas now. And quote, during their wait in Dr. Sweeney's office, they communicated the sickness, which would soon be known across the disintegrating country as Captain Trips, to more than 25 people, including a matronly woman who just came in to pay her bill before going on to pass the disease to her entire bridge club. Page 72. So this entire chapter is just excellent because it shows how just innocuous conversations, meetings that you, just chance meetings, affect your entire life after that. And this is such a horrible disease. Pretty much everyone who gets it dies. Chapter 9, we are introduced to Nick Andros, who's one of my favorite characters. He is a deaf-mute guy. And he is kind of like a Bill Bixby type character, a Dr. David Banner in the Incredible Hulk, the TV show, where he just kind of seems to walk around, pick up work, and then leave the town and go on to another town. And this Nick Andros guy had just, you know, done some work in Shoyo, Arkansas, and he's leaving town and he gets jumped by a whole bunch of bullies and they just beat him up. They beat him up, they leave him for dead, it's horrible, and they kind of end up pushing him into the road, and the person who almost hits him but stops just in time is a doctor. So Nick wakes up in a jail cell. So we have a sheriff, John Baker, which, isn't that the name of one of the Chips guys? John Baker? Pretty sure. I used to like Chips. I used to have a big crush on Punch. Anyway, so we don't know that Nick is deaf and mute yet, but we find out when the sheriff is trying to interact with him, and they can't communicate until the sheriff gives Nick a notepad to write with. And basically they find out that the man who led this gang of ruffians is named Ray Booth, and he happens to be the sheriff's brother-in-law. So the sheriff's like, great, now I've got to go and arrest my brother-in-law. I know he's an asshole, you know, and my wife knows he's an asshole, but this is very unfortunate. They decide to team up, the sheriff and Nick. They're going to go and start talking to Vince Hogan, who is probably the weakest link in this gang. And at the very end of the chapter, the sheriff sneezes, which anytime now that there's a sneeze, we're very sensitive to it, because sneezes and coughs are just pretty much an indicator that you're gonna die. Chapter 10, we find out a little bit more about Larry Underwood. He has woken up from a one-night stand. He's not exactly sure what transpired the night before. He was very drunk. He was hanging out with an old friend that he met up with, and they picked up a girl who was the friend of another girl. It was just a whole thing. He wakes up with this woman cooking breakfast for him, and he decides that he's just gonna leave. And she wants him to stay, and he just kind of says, no, I'm going. And the girl's not having it. She throws a spatula at him, it hits his head, and it makes him bleed. And, you know, he's like, I'm out, I'm not dealing with this. And he could have just, you know, he could have been more gentlemanly about it, but I guess he doesn't really owe her anything. And she starts yelling at him. He walks out of the apartment and starts walking away, and she starts throwing bottles at him, and I mean, it's pretty intense. And she says, quote, "You ain't no nice guy," on page 89, and this really hurts him. This sticks with him, and this will be a running theme throughout the book, where you ain't no nice guy just gets under his skin and he feels like a shitheel. He's bleeding from his forehead and he's a mess. You know, he's all gross from his you know, being hungover and out partying all night and disheveled, wearing the same clothes that he wore the night before. And he goes to the chemical bank building in chapter 11. That's where his mother is a custodial staff member, and he has a heart-to-heart with his mother in one of the custodial rooms. His mother says, quote, "I've been your mother for a long time, and you can't bullshit me, Larry. Trouble is something you've always looked around for when you couldn't just turn your head and see it. Sometimes I think you'd cross the street to step in dog shit." Page 93. His mother kind of punches him in the gut with this next phrase. She says, quote, "You're a taker, that's all." Page 93. So Larry feels bad, he's going to move out, but then he realizes that he has no money and he can't move out. And his mother is remorseful, and she, doesn't want to scare him away, but she wants him to know that, she wants Larry to know what she thinks about him, that he takes and takes and takes and doesn't really give. And he knows that she will give and give and give to him. So he does feel a little bad, but they kind of make up in their awkward, not really touchy-feely way, and she says, why don't you wait for me to get off of work, go watch a movie, and, just relax, have a nice day. So I love the description at the end of this chapter. Larry does go to the movie theater, quote, "and watched an insane malignant revenant named Freddy Krueger suck a number of teenagers into the quicksand of their own dreams, where all but one of them, the heroine, died. Freddy Krueger also appeared to die at the end, but it was hard to tell, and since this movie had a Roman numeral after its name and seemed to be well attended, Larry thought the man with the razors on the tips of his fingers would be back, without knowing that the persistent sound in the row behind him signaled the end to all that. There would be no more sequels, and in a very short time, there would be no more movies at all. In the row behind Larry, a man was coughing." Page 95, chapter 12. So this is where Franny has decided to tell her mother that she's pregnant. So they are in the parlor. This whole chapter is about the differences between Franny's parents. So the mother, her place in the house is a parlor where it's sterile and formal, very stiff, and then juxtapose that, Franny talks about her father's workshop, which is very dim and homey, smells of pipe smoke. It has a nice fireplace that makes it toasty, and it smells nice. It's so welcoming. Mother is reserved, bitchy, doesn't really, loves appearances more than people, and then her father is just the complete opposite. And Franny has memories where as a little kid she peed on the carpet in the parlor and her mom freaked out about it, and there was another time where she got into a bike accident, came home to get comfort from her parents, and her mom was in the parlor with someone. She walked in and she's bleeding all over, and her mom freaked out and yelled at her immediately to get out. Didn't have concern over her, she was just concerned over the blood that was dripping from Franny. Quote, "But she was leading Franny back into the kitchen where the floor could safely be bled upon, even as she was comforting her, and Franny never forgot that her first 2 words that day hadn't been, 'Oh, Franny,' but 'get out.'" That's page 99 to 100. So during the discussion of Franny's pregnancy, her mom is so over the top, so very dramatic, and such a bitch. She's just a huge, raving bitch. And she repeats over and over that Franny is a bad girl, and just the way she talks to her is just horrible, horrible. And you feel terrible for Franny. I don't know if you remember the fight that Anne and Susan Norton had in Salem's Lot, but this is like that, but on steroids. It is just out of control and terrible. And I guess Franny puts up with it because that's what she's grown up with, but I would not take that. So basically the mother slaps Franny. She says that Franny is not welcome. She's not going to support Franny financially. She's not going to have anything to do with this child. It's, Franny is being ungrateful and stupid and just all this stuff. And Peter appears at the door, and he won't step into the parlor, which is probably for the best because Carla would not like him stepping onto the parlor floor and scuffing it. with his work boots or anything like that. And Carla, like, she says, you know, I'm going to take care of this. I'm having this conversation with her. And she tries to shut the door on Peter. And he won't let her shut the door. And this woman is just crazy. She is just crazy. And finally Peter slaps her. He reaches the end of his rope and he slaps her. And he's like, you know, you've had this coming for a very long time. I don't like slapping women, but you deserve it. And so he gives this whole speech about how Carla has been so hateful and hurtful ever since Fred died. And he lays down the law and he says that, you know, the two of them are going to accept whatever Franny decides, whatever she wants. And if she wants a baby with a baby shower, Carla is going to give that baby shower to her. Peter says, you know, they're going to support her and give anything that Franny wants regarding this situation, Franny will get. And Carla is just feeling ganged up on, and she does not like this. She runs away, and she ends up going upstairs to sulk and pout because the two of them have conspired against her and undermined her and besmirched the family name and whatnot. So that's where we'll leave it today. Have a spooky day.